So I was curious what the thinking was with you and Chris in terms of you had the option, you could have brought in someone who had played center, veteran free agent center to compete with Michael Theater. Why did you decide to move Connor instead of going that other route? Was it just Connor's skill set? You said this is a guy who can be a good NFL center.
Exactly. We weren't signing him to be necessarily a center. We were signing an offensive lineman, and we thought his skill set would best be utilized at the center position, with him only having limited reps at it. We wanted to give him a full opportunity to make what we think, what we know. But first and foremost, we weren't going after Connor because it was like, hey, this guy is a center. We think he is a good offensive lineman that can play multiple positions. That's why those type of signings are intriguing, because you can try stuff, and I know he's going to do everything to be the best that he can be at that position. But if the team is better off with him at another position, that's the great thing about Connor, is that he's learning the offense from the inside out at the position where you learn everything, the center position.
Would you say that would preclude you from looking outside if you say it's late August, early September? There are obviously veteran centers available.
You're just trying to do the best thing that's available to you with your options. So you exhaust everything, and then you're sitting there saying, okay, well, what's better? This scenario where you get injuries and you have Connor at center and you're signing someone else off the street, or there's somebody from your practice squad or within, or you don't just black and white that to me. And I know that's the way Chris feels as well. The biggest thing is that you exhaust all scenarios so that you can attempt to do the best thing for the Miami Dolphins.
In terms of the position from your scheme, what are you looking for from the center in sort of a wide zone scheme?
There's everybody at every position wants the biggest, fastest, strongest. And so you want someone that can really move. You don't always have to move to be an effective center. There's multiple ways of being a productive player. But in an ideal world, you can do the best job attacking a defense if you have some athleticism at the position, and then you have some strength because it's close quarters contact a lot of times. You have someone breathing on you as close to the ball as any other player on the line of scrimmage, and then you have to learn more about them, and you have to learn. They have to make line calls that 4 other players plus tight ends and are depending on, so that we're all on the same page. That orchestration, especially in modern day NFL, is tough. So you have to know a component of their mental capability as well, which is why Connor was so attracted to us, because it's house money. That's an NFL guard or center, in our opinion.
I wanted to ask you about play calling. Will you be speaking directly to Tua? We're letting the place down, and so between now and the first game of the regular season, how do you plan to go about the rehearsal part of that? I haven't been around for a while, so I don't know if I missed some of that, seeing some of that.
Well, you'll be happy to know that work on it every day. That's why you'll see me communicating with the walkie-talkie. That's what's simulating that we communicate as much as possible in that vein, speaker to ear, and they get comfortable hearing, the way that sounds. Words can sound alike. X's sound like F's. You got to get used to how people talk, and you have to get reps and mess it up. And every day, that's why we do it in that fashion. So we're prepared to communicate to each other on game day coming week 1.
How aggressive do you think your mindset will be? And I know it can vary from game for game, but overarchingly, going for it on 4th down, attacking the sticks early in series, how aggressive do you think you'll be?
I think it's kind of a boring answer, but I'm just I'm very careful to not make an absolute because I think it's important to kind of evaluate the scenario in all given circumstances. Case in point, so by nature I'm an aggressive guy when it comes to football and like to utilize and make big plays and utilize speed and all that stuff. But there was a transition, an experience that really stood out in 2019. It was the first time that we'd ever coached offense and had a top 10 defense. When you had that, there were certain games that you realize that being aggressive might be an unnecessary risk if the defense isn't going to allow a point. Why give them an opportunity? So I think it's important to not pigeonhole yourself. I also think that's a competitive advantage for the Miami Dolphins, because if you have just a typecast of like how you operate, the other team gets paid too, and defensive coordinators probably know that pattern. So I think that's the value of approaching each and every situation independently. I know that I'm aggressive, but I have to take in consideration all things. It's not about offensive stats, it's about winning the football game. And if winning the football game is 3-0, there's no asterisks on that W.
With Melvin, obviously, you got to see him on the field yesterday. A, how did he look after a layoff? And B, what gives you confidence that his level of production will be higher than it was in the last couple of years?
It was really cool to see him yesterday, because his plan was, he was practicing for the first time, but he wasn't scheduled. And we had planned to not have him in team periods, just so we don't rush the process and make sure we don't put him in harm's way. And he was fighting tooth and nail with the defensive coaches in general, and they thought it was better they let the guy in for a couple plays, which I immediately saw and made sure that it was on his agenda, which it was. And that's what you want as a leader on the team or a veteran player that's had production. You want to be on the field. You want younger players to understand it's a privilege to be on the field. And with regard to his how I feel about him moving forward, to me, I didn't really necessarily, I don't even know how many sacks he totally had, because I don't look at it that way. My job is to study the player, and what I saw was he had a lot of impact. Specifically, he was a better run defender than I'd remembered him from the beginning of his career. He's really grown in that. But as a pass rusher, he had a lot of activity in and around the quarterback that, in our opinion, would, if there was a little more production on those particular plays where he had some really good pass rush moves, he might have, his sack total might be twice or three times whatever it is. So he was already producing, I think, a little more than people realize in terms of quarterback pressures. And in the system around the guys that we're playing with, we're encouraged to add him to the competition, because it's a group of people. If you want to be a good defense in the National Football League, whether you have to have depth, because it can't be conditional that you're able to really give it your all. And defense can get tiring. You need to be able to have multiple pass rushers from every spot, and edge setters and stack linebackers and all of that, because the second, if you only have one guy, the second that he goes down, you can't have one player dictate the outcome of an entire defense. So I'm pumped about his contribution and where he's at and moving forward, and excited to see him continue to grow in the defense.
You mentioned yesterday that Tua could be super hard on himself. I was curious, is that something you've ever personally had to deal with in your career, as for whatnot, how plays work out or whatever? And are there any tips you gave him about how to do that?
It's funny you asked that. I did give him a tip. There was a part in my career where I was contributing to the offensive game plan, and you know I was amongst the team. The team was experiencing a lot of success at the time, and my particular there were some good games we had, specifically in my portion of the game plan, and then you know it was a couple weeks. I was younger in my career, and I started feeling pretty good about myself, and then all of a sudden we had a poor performance, didn't produce, and I got in the tank, and we still won. And I felt like I let the team down. And then I didn't realize until feeling that how I was totally wrong to begin with, that for me to sit here and think that for anyone to think that you're the reason you win or lose, you don't get the big picture. And so for you to sit there and be hard on yourself, what is that doing for your teammates? Is that making you better? I'm cool if it makes you better, which is why it's cool to be accountable. But you all of a sudden start going off the rails. Dude, it doesn't matter. People are depending on you. If you make all the plays you want to or not, you still, regardless, you might have the perfect game. We might not win. It's not about that. It's about being your best, but also relying on your teammates. And when you don't do well, or in my case, when I come up with a game plan that is trash, that isn't all on me. Players still have to play, and it's nothing individually. It's all collective, and that's the biggest lesson that I've been able to tell him.
You spoke about this yesterday, the shorter practices, and it's kind of silly to ask you this going into day 2, but how do you balance that incessant need to get everything done versus the need to keep guys fresh? And
very, very challenging. It ends up, you have to be very forthright with the players so they understand that where you're making concessions in reps, that has to be made up in a walkthrough format or whatever. But you know, time has proven that, you know, if you want to be elite at something, you have to deliberately practice it, and practicing it at full speed is the only way to truly adjust your full speed play. And so that understanding the value and the intent that you have to have, and the deliberate nature that you have to approach something on each and every rep, the less reps you do, the more critical it becomes. But we believe and have found that if players are treating practice reps closer to game reps, that it is an overall benefit to them, as long as they understand that, hey, we need to make these reps up somewhere.
The O-line as a whole, there had to be something you liked from OTAs and minicamp to keep alignment consistent first day of camp. What was it about guys at their positions that left you encouraged?
That it was the highs and lows, to be honest. Because again, we were going against a scheme that was working on building upon what they'd done last year and they've been doing for the last couple of years. So in that day one, and without their techniques, you know, they're used to doing it, reps, right? So in that process, you know that they're at a competitive advantage at the very beginning, the first time you step on the field, and then once that happens for one day, you're like, yeah, you have the out. Then how do you respond? How do you correct stuff? That's the nature of the business we're in. And not that anything was perfect. It was that individuals were responding to failures and correcting mistakes, which is why you're encouraged moving forward. And each and every player has that opportunity every snap. So that's why, even if it's also not the biggest deal in the world and unheard of to have guys on the second and third team move up at any position as well. So you're just trying to keep competition high, get the best out of people, and make sure that guys are giving their best effort and getting better each and every day.
What were your thoughts on day one, and what's your message heading into day two, and where would you evaluate them on the juice level?
choose. Thoughts. I had several thoughts. But like, I was very happy with day one because it was a purposeful practice. To me, you can't, to say it was a good practice to me is that the practice was worth something moving forward, meaning that both teams had, or both sides of the ball had their best intent, so you got an actual physical or physiological rep in the process. And if you weren't successful, then you can actually you can steal, like, you won't have to learn that lesson in a game when you're running full speed. So as long as that's happening, if we want, all of our guys want to be a very good team. Very good teams are by nature going to have inter practice adversity because both sides of the ball should be good. So, they get paid too, basically. So I was happy from that standpoint, and I feel like it put us in a position to get better today. And so then today I'll be able to validate that, hey, yesterday was a real good practice from that standpoint. And the way that I hope the Miami Dolphins practice moving forward is that both sides of the ball, just like any game with two really good teams, both sides of the ball make their plays, but also handle adversity and go through it, which is what we're getting reps in the hot sweat outside every day.